it's a great opportunity to come and sit down with you. As you're aware, what we're doing is we're conducting interviews with our prior Corps chiefs and kind of talking to them what are the traits, their opportunities they had going throughout the medical corps, medical service corps, that brought them to the position where they ultimately became our Corps chief. I looked at your career and I was looking at, you were the 15th Corps chief that served from November 99 to May of 2001.
Right.
So the question I have for you, sir, is serving 29 years, can you offer some examples of lessons learned, setbacks and barriers faced throughout your tenure as an MSC?
Sure. Well, that's 29 years is a long time, and
Yes,
and there are ups and downs in all those careers. I would say that in a general context, that I had more ups than certainly downs. I had great experiences, great mentors. I think if I had to pick a particular up, was the early part of my career. When I came into Medical Service Corps, when I went through the HSA class at Shepherd, there was 33 of us, and I think I was voted the guy most likely to do 4 years and get out. I really had no intention of staying. I had, that wasn't a career that I had planned on. And then when I was able to go out to my first assignment and then my second assignment, I ended up working with terrific mentors, senior officers, colonels, lieutenant colonels, who really took an interest in my career, took an interest in developing my career, saw potential that I probably didn't see, to take on different responsibilities. So I was able to go through a lot of different jobs in a very short period of time. As I've often said before, I had like 7 jobs in the first 7 years, and some that may not sound good. Some people that may not sound good, but it was really gave me a chance to do really almost every single functional area. I think in the first 7 years I had touched every single functional area that medical service corps officers traditionally had. So that gave me really a perspective, a sort of a broader view of what a medical service corps was all about. I think in that context, then that then helped me then launch myself into a headquarters career. I spent a couple assignments in headquarters, did a variety of things, and I think all of that really gave me a perspective that was a breadth of perspective and a depth of perspective. So I think that was really the best up I had, if you will, the initial up side of my career. I didn't have a lot of downsides. There were some assignments I was desperate to be a hospital administrator. Other assignments came along, and I took other assignments, headquarters jobs. I was asked to do headquarters jobs, but my career aspiration was to be a hospital administrator. And so it was until about halfway through my career I was sort of plucked out of a job that I was at and was able to go to Pease Air Force Base, New Hampshire, as my first administrator's job. And so, but there was a couple of assignments in there that I ended up being diverted to other things that I was. That I would have preferred to go on to be an administrator of maybe a clinic or then to a hospital. But by and large, I didn't take many blows in my career, I have to confess. I didn't have a lot of downs where I thought, oh, this was, I had good people to work for, and I had some people that were challenging to work for sure. And some of those bleak days working for some people who I didn't think had maybe the integrity or the skills or the abilities maybe to be in those positions. The good news is almost never a medical service corps officer, but those days were some trying days in terms of getting things accomplished that I knew we needed to do. But overall, I think if I had to look back at my career, it was a pretty positive time. I don't look back with any regrets, and I don't look back with a lot of missed opportunities in my career. So. Overall, and then later in my career, I think I ran into other folks that were great leaders. I began to see terrific leaders, and I think Chip Roadman was Surgeon General while I was there, and General Carlton, frankly, who's the one who asked me to be the Corps Chief. Both great leaders, and those became role models for me too, in terms of their intellect and their ability and their analytical talents. To think through problems, and I think later. So I think like most careers, you are shaped by sometimes the people you work for. The other upside for me was the relationships. Early in my career, as a second lieutenant, I was surrounded by really competent, capable, dedicated medical service corps officers. Not just my bosses, but my fellow associate administrators, assistant administrators in these facilities. And so what you found is that there is a cadre, and many of these folks went on to have very stellar Air Force Medical Service Corps careers, retired as colonels. And I think that having those people surround you, and as I've often said, they kind of kept me from making mistakes, and so there's relationships are very important as well. So I had great relationships, great leaders, and really, the lessons that I learned were, taking care of people, being a good peer, and then eventually in leadership roles, being a good leader, not just for the Medical Service Corps, but of course for all the other, for the enlisted groups as well. Because one of the reasons that I was able to move and take different jobs was because the officers that did that for me also knew they had great NCOs that knew that I wasn't going to stumble. They would keep me from stumbling. And I had some very grizzled old chief master sergeants, that grab you sort of by the necktie and say, let me explain this to you.
Sometimes you need that.
Yeah, you do, absolutely.
Sure, absolutely. Certainly I appreciate that. I like, you look at some of the examples that you've done, things you've done throughout your career. When I look at, you say you really have no real bad assignments, you had a good experience in your career. Mm-hmm. What leadership skills would you say, do you find most important during your tenure as an embassy?
I think there's so many different things that leaders have to bring to the table. There is a sense of discipline and order that leaders bring, because a disorganized unit is an ineffective unit. But there's also the empathetic side and the supervisor side that looks at particularly the younger officers and to some extent the more junior NCOs and enlisted folks, and has to look at those people from an empathetic, that these are not people who have the same experience as you do. So you have to look at it from their lens, their eyes, and how are they viewing it. There's a pure discipline side. Some people just mess up, and you just have to take a leadership role. There are people who choose not to comply with what are legitimate activities and legitimate regulations and legitimate, the legitimacy of how we do our business and the way in which we do our business. And so there is a discipline side as a leader that you have to undertake, and that has to be swift and fair. But I think that sometimes the softer skills of leadership, of letting people have a voice, letting people speak their voice, letting them have a say about what they think. You may sit there and think, okay, I can recall many times thinking to myself, if I could be anywhere in the planet but right here, I'd push that button. But you sit and listen to them because they have a point of view, they have a perspective, and all that adds. I know what I think. The important thing was I need to know what you think. And you tell me what you think, because that will add to my understanding of the problem, of the issue, the policy, the process, the program, what we need to have done. And so from a leadership skills, I think the ability to listen and not just hear, but to listen carefully, to interact with those people on a personal level, to understand that there is a perspective, to hold people accountable, often the discipline side, unfortunately, but to hold people accountable. I think all of those are skills that you grow up. And again, if you have good mentors and good leaders and good role models, it's easier to understand those if you're treated in that way as well. So I think those become the attributes of a solid leader in the Medical Service Corps. It's a great corps. It's a calling. And as I've said previously, in all respects, we're a corps without a license. We don't have a license to be there. We're there because of our competency and our capabilities and our ability to get the job done. And as long as we retain that, we always will remain relevant to the Air Force Medical Service as well as to the Air Force. And so, understanding those skills and growing those skills, not just, as I've said when I was Chief of the Corps to the colonels, it's not about you anymore. It's about them. It's about the people that come in behind you. It's all about them. You've made it to the top. Okay. Now let's make sure we put the ladder down to help the rest of them get back up as well. And I think those become the leadership skills as I saw as a Corps Chief. So,
I agree. As we've interviewed the other Corps Chiefs, we found that servant leadership, as you're referring to, is putting that ladder down, has been very important for every one of them.
One of the greatest honors I had was when I retired. General Carlton said that comment that he made was that I was the epitome of servant leaders. And that really meant a lot, because I really took that very seriously. Even as a young colonel, I was at Ellsworth and pinned on colonel, and then I went down to Keesler at the lead agent office back in the Tricare days. Had a lot of different people. My first joint sort of job with a bunch of Army and Navy guys, and you really felt you had to prove yourself as a leader. I knew I was competent in terms of my technical skills. I knew I was pretty confident in my ability to do what I needed to do. The question was, could I then translate those leadership skills so that Army and Navy folks understood the leadership? And I wasn't viewed as an Air Force officer, but I wanted to be viewed as their leader and their supervisor and their supporter, frankly. And that really, that was a challenge. I mean, not that they were a challenge, but understanding their culture and understanding how the Navy promotion system works or the Army promotion system works. Right.
So when I look through your career, and as a leader from a flight commander, squadron command, and other things you've done in your leadership roles, did you find there's a difference between being a leader in command is in one of your units versus being a leader as a corps chief?
Only in the sense of discipline, I think. I think the discipline area, because there you felt really accountable. And I can recall at Ellsworth when I was commanding officer at the hospital, there was a hospital, having a wing commander. We had a discipline issue. It was going to require, I think, an Article 15. I think it was required, and the wing had a policy that only he would give Article 15s. That was his policy. And so I went to see him. He's a brigadier general. I went to see him, a bomb wing commander, SAC guy. Okay, you get the image. And went to see him. And I said, we have this issue. And he said, have you talked to the attorneys? And of course I had. Okay. And he said, well, okay. And he said, I'll do. And I said, well, isn't that my job? I'm the commander of this unit. Isn't it my job to issue the discipline? And he thought about that and he said, okay. And that meant the world to me, that a line wing commander would think enough of me to let me issue the discipline that he hadn't done for any of his other group commanders. And I think so the discipline side, okay, was clearly the difference. The leadership skills of listening, mentoring, understanding, being proactive, trying to set out reasonable policies, being inclusive as far as of what what they understand, being inclusive of decision making. Those skills remain pretty much the same. Attention to detail, is important to me. And so I think as the Corps chief, I didn't see it. What I saw the difference there was a little more of persuasion. I wasn't a flag officer, Corps chief, and as a result, it was with the power of persuasion. We used to laugh that we had a medical service officer in a different place who we used to call the Corps chief in exile, because he kind of was like running his own sort of corps down there, his own people, and that was fine. We had a good. We were in the same HSA class, and so we were being good friends. But it was kind of a joke. But it really was the power of persuasion, because we're all colonels, and so. One of the things I did, one of the accomplishments I thought was, it was my time that we created two things. One, the new colonels meeting, where we brought all the new colonels in, all the new selects to a single place, and then we met with them to kind of talk about what it meant to be a colonel. And my message was, as I said earlier, it's about them now. Okay, you've made it to the top of this mountain. Now it's about the people that you need to leave a ladder for. And talk about integrity, talk about the Corps, bring them into the policy decisions, the personnel decisions, the kinds of things we needed to do. And then the second thing that we did was we created the associate Corps chief positions. We didn't have that before. And it was one of the things that I talked to the Corps, the colonels. At that time, the MAGCOMs were kind of the sort of the Dutch masters of the Corps. Talked to them about creating a functional associate Corps chiefs, people, and I think Jay Burke still has that. The idea being that these were the people who could be the visible mentors for people that were in that particular functional field. We had gotten astray. We had all kinds of people in all kinds of areas, and we needed to get back to the basics of what's it mean to be a resource manager or a patient administration officer. These were because those were the jobs back then.
We're still doing it now.
Yeah, and I see that today. In the strategic plan that the Corps has, it's important. I know one of his big issues is back to basics. And that's always an issue, to make sure that we haven't lost our way in terms of our Corps skills and our Corps competencies. I think that's really important, and I applaud Jay for doing that. I think that's been really important to go back. And it's important for all the Corps chiefs, no matter who it was, to make sure that we haven't wandered off someplace. And in a very dynamic environment that we're in now, with all the changes that are confronting us and what it's been like over the last 15 or 20 years with deployments, it's easy to sort of get off the core stuff. Not that those other things aren't as critically important, but they're still the core things that make this core the most relevant that it can be in terms of systems management, systems design, et cetera. So.
Well, and I think it's patient safety, going back to the basics so that we can focus on that patient safety, make sure we're taking care of them and making things more that patient-centered. When I'm looking at some of the leadership philosophies, you've hit on quite a few of them already. Mm-hmm. What would you say your leadership philosophy is?
Inclusiveness, I think. I think my philosophy was the more, you can be the most confident in a person, but the most confident person that understands that they don't know it all is the most valued person. And so I didn't think I knew it all. Okay, I knew what I knew, and I was pretty good in certain areas. Okay, but I knew I didn't know a lot about systems. I knew, even though I'd touched base in those jobs along the way. And so I knew that inclusiveness was going to be the key. Again, back to the associate core chief idea. Okay, the idea was I didn't know everything about resource management or patient administration or systems or logistics or any of the functional areas. But I knew that there were people in that core that really did. So you have legends in logistics like Tim Morgan, people in resource management like Jim Geiger. I mean, people that really, as I call them, the Dutch masters, the guys that really knew that business. And if I included them in the policy discussion, okay, I knew that I would have the best possible decisions to be made about the policies about the core. Remember, too, that at that time, we had come out of the period of time when the core chief job was just the core chief job, a few core chiefs before me. And so the core chiefs had other jobs, had other responsibilities. I was the Assistant Surgeon General for Programs and Resources. So I had everything in the Air Force headquarters except for readiness and the clinical stuff. everything else belonged to me. And I had a whole bunch of folks in San Antonio. And I knew I didn't know nearly as much as those guys did about those functional areas. So being inclusive in those decisions and bringing them in, so that's the associate core chief positions, to have those expertise, I think really became, to me, the most important thing to make sure that there was, I brought in those diverse ideas, those diverse thoughts. And we had some spirited discussions. I mean, there's different opinions, and that's good. And I think that was it to me. I was also very attentive, and I've mentioned this earlier in our interview, about this attention to detail. I really do think that big things are made up of small things. And I think that if you can manufacture a system, okay, with your people that take care of the small things, that meet suspenses, that get the accomplishments done, that look at, that really are building blocks of the bigger decisions that have to be made, not just decisions about the core. But we remember the core is just representing one aspect of a diverse Air Force Medical Service that has to eventually get to the Surgeon General or the Deputy Surgeon General. So bringing those kinds of details, okay, so that they were making the best possible decisions that they could make, made us valuable, but also made I think for the better decisions. So I think bringing more ideas together and then paying attention to the finer points. And I found that in the hospital too, when I worked in the hospital. If you let things slide, okay, General Roman used to say, his comment, General Roman used to say, if you let it happen, it will happen. Okay, so you had to make sure that you kind of paid attention to those details, because if you let it slide, it will slide. It's just the nature of the business. In a busy world, in a busy environment, things will happen. So pulling them back in and saying, okay, let's get this right. Okay, let's get the money right. I was doing money at the time, finances. Let's get the finances right. Do we really have the right analytics behind it? So I think those kinds of things, I think, played a real role in what I was trying to do. And I think on a personal level, I think, making sure that we were looking at the core as a pipeline, so that we as the colonels were worried about not just the next set of lieutenant colonels coming through, but worried about what is the school teaching, what are we learning, what is our mentoring program, what's our training programs. So being sort of personnel focused, and then of course with back and then that we didn't have, I guess we didn't have 4As. I guess we had something else, 906s, I guess, and 915s. AFSCs, that group of folks,
Sure.
making sure that they were linked into it. So over the years, I've seen a greater linkage between that enlisted community and the Medical Service Corps community, kind of bringing that together. I think that's really important too.
I think you're correct. I think when we look at the MSC as a core, it's not just we as officers, but it's our enlisted as well.
Absolutely.
We cannot survive. I look at my own flight. I cannot survive without them. And so I think what you're talking about is absolutely correct.
Absolutely.
And finding those individuals within our
Sure.
core or within our section, we have those experts.
Right.
Much like going back to the HSA days that you talked about, different areas that we don't understand, we can reach out. Looking at your interview questions, we've had every Corps chief
Sure.
ask a series of interview questions. We did a survey, as you
Sure.
just completed.
Mm-hmm.
Within that survey, two focuses area, according to the survey that came out. One was idle influence, which is described as setting a positive example for others to emulate.
Right.
And the other one is inspirational motivation, as described as developing and articulating an organization and valuing others, inspired others to perform beyond capabilities. I want to hit the first one real quick.
Sure.
Is how did you share? I mean, here you are, a colonel with all of the colonels. How did you share your values and beliefs with them to motivate them to do things?
I think it started with sort of a sense of transparency. That it was important to me that the colonels knew sort of what we were up to. So I used to send out a week or 2 weeks an email, a very long email. Okay, this is back when Microsoft let you color things.
Sure.
And I would send it out to the senior leadership, so the Corps associates and the MAGCOM guys. They were kind of the more senior people, and then they could do with it what they want with their colonels. I didn't try to usurp that authority, but I would put in there. If you read nothing, this literally is what I said, if you read nothing in this email but what's in red, good on you. But I would lay out what was going on at the air staff. What was going on, what were the things were happening, what are we hearing, money-wise, resource-wise, policy-wise, sort of, and no inside information. I mean, I didn't want to provide, if the Surgeon General gave me something in comments, I wasn't going to share that.
They felt included.
But to make sure they felt included into this discussion. So all they had to do is read the red sentences, okay? They could read the rest for context, but they could read the whole thing. The red part. The idea being that if they knew that I was sending out these emails, okay, and opening up to them to say, okay, this is what's going on up here, that when we got to the choices, like General Burks talks about making tough choices, they would know the context of that choices were going to be in, okay? So the transparency and that inclusiveness I talked about earlier became really kind of how you begin to motivate people, because if they see the problem, okay, and they feel engaged in the issue, okay, in some form or fashion, you're likely to get better responses and better input, and also a little less resistance, if you will. Well, I had to make some tough decisions about what we're going to do in the Corps. At the time I was Corps Chief, I decided that I was going to mask for promotion to major, whether or not they were certified by the American College or by the AMA, to mask that on the record. That was a very controversial decision. Okay. And my rationale for making that decision was I felt that younger officers were focusing too much on ACHE and AMA and getting certified, okay, in their certification. Then they were on things like SOS, learning their jobs, understanding, the regulations and how we did our business, et cetera. And I wanted to divert their attention away from that they needed to do these other things first. They could get their certification, okay, but it wasn't going to be preeminent for them. And I was able to convince the Chief of Staff of the Air Force to do that. Okay. Now that was not a clear-cut decision. It was not an uncontroversial decision with my Corps leaders. Okay. But I felt it was important because I began to think that we're slipping away from what we were there to do, and that's probably been reversed by now, which is fine. But for that period of time, we needed to kind of divert our attention back to the core competencies, and so. But by laying out the issues, I think having these colonel meetings like General Burks does. Now, we didn't have as big as he did, I will confess. And by having the new Corps colonels meet, after the board came out and the results were announced, we would call them all in, have them TDY.
Excellent, I appreciate it.
I just had an issue with the camera for probably the last 15 seconds of
Okay.
response. It's back on, it's ready to go.
Essentially, we start take two.
Take two. Same question?
That's
Just
right.
the last probably 15 seconds of that was.
Well, okay.
I think at the end, I think you restated it. I think you said it once, and then you went through and I kind of summed it up. Really, what it came down to is how you were able to convince them.
Well, I think it's inclusiveness. I think, again, bringing them into the problem helps bring them into the solution because they feel like they're invested in that. So when we went through that process, laying out what you believe the issue, and then we can have the debate. We can have the honest, open debate. And what we did is by bringing in the colonels group, starting the associates corps chief, and then having the new colonels come in, we sort of brought them more and more into it. And that's why I applaud what Jay Burks is doing now by bringing these folks together in this forum. I realized that there was a hiatus of these meetings. But this is so important to bring them together, and you can see the camaraderie that's in these meetings, and that doesn't come if they didn't know each other. These people, a lot of these people have grown up together, know each other. I don't know as many as I used to, but I know a lot of them, and that's an important aspect that they see themselves as having a voice in this process. And I think that becomes part of the servant leadership issue is that you got people have to have a voice. You have to make a decision as the corps chief. No one's going to make it for you. And if they do make it for you, you don't need to be the corps chief. But you'll have to make the decision, but it will be with input. And that becomes, I think, the most critical thing, that people feel invested in a transparent kind of way.
I agree, and I think they'd appreciate it. So in 2001, when you left, and you retired for the first time, I know you're working again, but you retired for the first time.
My wife knows that very well.
Yes, I'm sure she does. As the corps chief, what did you hope to leave the MSC Corps?
Well, I think I wasn't long a corps chief. I was a fairly short period of time as a corps chief, and there was no particular reason for that. I had decided that it was time to go, and one of the reasons is that when General Wyrick preceded me and I took over. And then Steve Miggs was out in a senior position, and the hope was that when I retired, that then Steve would be in a position in a competitive way to get the star. That didn't work out, particularly that way. But I knew I wasn't going to, and I didn't want to stop somebody else from having a shot at it. So I was only there a couple of years, but so I didn't have this long tenure as corps chief, and I could have stayed longer, and it just didn't make sense to me personally, particularly to my wife, but also to the corps. So the legacy I wanted to leave for the corps was that we were organized for success, that we had a cadre of medical service corps officers that were working together well at the senior leadership, that could translate that down to the local level, that we had examined our core competencies. When I was there, we started a medical service corps review. When I came in the Air Force, we had about 1,200 MSCs. We had 130 facilities and 80 hospitals, and then when I retired, at anywhere near that, we still had 1,200 MSCs. So the rhetorical question that I asked the corps leadership was, are we in the right business? And I said that, and that's what I said, I don't know if we have too many or too few. But I wonder if we should examine that question. I know Steve took that on after I left, to really kind of ask ourselves that sort of intuitive question. So I wanted to have an introspective corps. I wanted to have a cohesive corps. I wanted to have a bunch of colonels, not knowing if it wasn't until later we knew that they were sort of the designated star. But at that time it was still, you had to fight for that. And so I wanted to leave a corps that as a group of senior leaders, as 06s, we're working well together, that sort of we had an organizational structure sort of that fit with the associate corps chiefs, and that we were aligned properly, and that we were self-reflective about where we were going as a corps. I think we did all that, and I think some of that still goes on now. I think you see it in Jay's strategic plan. I think you see it. There is a reflectiveness about are we back to basics? Are we doing the right things? Are we relevant? Do we remain in our core competencies? Are we reflective of what the Air Force Medical Service, not Medical Service Corps, but Medical Service needs? That reflectiveness is really important for a corps, because it's big and it's spread out. And so you have to kind of bring it together. You can't bring it all together. I can't have all the captains, lieutenants, and majors together. We can do it in Chicago, more or less, but you can't do that on a regular basis. So you really rely on your leaders, the other leaders in the corps, the other colonels in the corps, to really lead that discussion with their people and support it. And I think those were the kinds of things I wanted to leave. That we're organized right, we're focused right, that we had the right, that we knew the lines of our work, that we were then applying our analytics to that line so that we said, okay, if we are going to be in the resource management business, how do we start somebody? Where do they go? And what do they need to be at the top of that chain? And what experiences make them better at the top? I always felt that I was a better programs and resources guy because I had been a commanding officer, I had been a hospital administrator, I had done all the functional areas, including squadron commander. You know, I had done all these things so that when people came in to talk to me, I have a relative understanding of what the issues were that they were facing. I think I was better for that because I had this breadth of experience. I will tell you that during the time, you know, going through it, I thought, can I ever just settle down? Can I just be something, you know? Because you just about the time you master then patient administration. When I started, it was called registrar, and I'm sure the Pete Belisarius and those guys will understand. You know, it was called the registrar function, okay? And then I was just about at the point where, okay, I really understand this. Hey, go do resource management for a while. Go do logistics. Go do squadron command. Go do. I was the director of programs and systems at I didn't know. We didn't have a computer in headquarters. I was a systems guy. You know, and it's like, I don't know anything about this. Well, I guess I better learn. Who can I go talk to learn about this?
That still happens.
Yeah, and so I think trying to look at that from the career development pyramid, how you bring them in, what you do, what do we teach at school? I think that's what I was trying to do in my time there.
I do appreciate it. I've noticed that a lot of things we've talked about today, we are still doing. So,
Yeah.
you know, you're looking at
Sure.
16 years later, and
Yeah.
many of the things that you've influenced
Yeah.
are still in force now.
Well, there was no brilliance. It was all looking at it, trying to look at it with a clear lens and with great advice from some very, very senior people in our Corps who were great advisors to me as Corps Chief, and frankly could have been as good or better Corps Chiefs than I was, but some terrific, terrific people that I had blessed with having worked around me. So it really is was really a team effort, frankly.
Well, speaking about that advice, and the advice you received from wise, older MSCs, as the wisest, oldest MSC in this room,
Okay.
what are some last-minute advice you can give future MSCs?
One I think is a couple things. I think one is don't get bogged down in the noise level. Okay, there's a lot going on. You know, you've got a new administration, you've got new leaders in the Department of Defense, you've got great pressures from budget pressures and people pressures and size pressures and force structure pressures. You've got the emphasis now on greater jointness. All of that is important and it's good work, but don't get blinded by that. Don't be distracted by that. There are core things that this Corps is excellent at. Systems-based thinking, resource design, programmatic management, okay? Programmatics in general, okay? Patient relationship management, systems, health systems, that no one's better than us. You know, we as I've said earlier, you know, we're a Corps without a license, but our license to be there is our competency. And all of the things that the future faces for the Corps are all things that we are very good as a Corps at doing, very good at doing. So my advice is perseverance and optimism. This isn't the last crisis we'll go through. I mean, it's not the first we'll go through in terms of change. You know, the culture of the Corps is superior. The culture of the Corps, the service aspect of the Corps, the integrity aspect of the Corps, the excellence aspect of the force. The Corps, you know, that really lives the Air Force core values is the Medical Service Corps. Not that, and that doesn't denigrate the other corps. I don't mean that at all. But those competencies, those core integrity, service, excellence, really are the epitome of the Medical Service Corps, because those are the things that we do very, very well. So all of the demands that are coming at us are really things that the Medical Service Corps retains superior relevance over and mastery of. And I think that's important for the future. And I think, you know, maintaining perseverance, maintaining optimism, you know, is going to be important in an era of some dramatic change here in the near and probably the far future. So I think those are the things that if I had to give advice, is you know, that this is all going to work out and the Corps is going to be stronger at the end of it.
Well, sir, hey, I do appreciate it. It's been great. It's been
Thanks.
really enjoyed.
Thanks for having me. Yeah,
Have
thanks.
seen
I'm
that
sorry it
with
took
you.
so long to get here.
No,
Yeah.
but at least we did.
Yeah,
You know,
thanks.
we're very grateful for the opportunity to sit down and put this part of our history
Sure.
as one of our core chiefs. It is.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I appreciate being asked. That was very nice.
So, I
Thanks.
thank you.
Thank you. We're good.
Right, we're
Wrap. We're wrapped.